episode 34. This is going to be a hit piece on internet sellers selling parts online. Guys, you know I've done quite a few videos on brakes lately, and some of the brake videos that I've done, they've done well on the internet, but here's the issue. Cheap parts don't fly with me. So before we really get into this video, let's go ahead and hit up the announcements. Guys, thank you for all the support lately. Thank you for all the likes and the subscribes. It really does help build the channel. I'm trying to build this channel to give you guys more information and more content. We've got a lot coming up. I'm going to do a small little rundown of kind of some of the projects we're looking at in the next couple weeks at the end of this video. So make sure you guys stay tuned until the end. Let me go ahead and get my chat set up for you guys, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll with this video. So every video I got to go through and switch it over so I see all chats that come through. That way I know kind of what you guys are asking. Again, at the end of this video, guys, I'll do the Q&A section and I'll break down some of the news that happened throughout the week. That's what we talk about towards the tail end of the video. Again, I'll also give you guys a rundown of where we're at with some of the projects and things that you guys can look forward to in the future coming up. What we're going to discuss today: cheap internet parts. Just because you buy something online and you think it looks like it's good quality doesn't mean you're getting what you paid for. Prime example is I did a brake job on Malibu steel only about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks. And I'm already having issues with the pads. So how do you tell if you got the cheap pads versus the ceramics? Two things are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of brake dust. Brake dust is an indication that you have cheap pads, because the ceramic pads do not throw dust at all. There is no dust. They will not turn your rims black. The other thing is the semi-metallic pads will squeak really loud even if you're not applying the brake pressure, meaning you're going to get a constant squeak. Sometimes you'll only get it if you're cornering and you'll hear it, squeak, squeak, squeak. That comes from semi-metallic pads. The reason that they do the semi-metallics is it is cheaper than doing the ceramic pads. You can buy those cheaper. The kit I bought online from Amazon flat out said ceramic brake pads with drilled and slotted rotors. I questioned the price because the way that it was priced out, the pads were the super cheap price that you could buy at any auto parts store. That is enough to raise a red flag in my mind because I've done this so many different times. As I buy parts, I realize which ones are good and which ones are bad, and I tend to stay away from the ones that are not doing so good. If I put a no-name brand rotor and pad on, the rotor holds up but the pads don't, I might buy that for the rotor again, but I'll never install those pads. And unfortunately, that's something that you guys are not going to have the time nor the money to be playing around with. So you need to know what is good and what isn't. Guys, there is a huge scam on internet parts right now. It's not just brake pads. It's also spark plugs. I'm going to go ahead and rail the industry on this because a lot of these parts are coming from overseas and are not made to proper specifications. They're made cheaply, they're made quickly, and oftentimes they're not to the OEM spec that it needs to be in order for it to work right. Also, they will tend to say that they're using the more expensive materials when they're actually using the cheaper. One of those issues has come lately in the spark plugs, buying them online, because it's too risky to know whether or not you're getting a cheap Chinese knockoff spark plug versus the actual spark plug. I was looking at a set of these. Guys, we put E3s in this car. I'm now getting 30.5 miles to the gallon with this Malibu, a 2012 Malibu. Had I went with the cheap knockoff ones off of Amazon, I probably would have regretted it quite a bit. We got our first chat in. LM edits. Are you a mechanic? Actually, I've been dealing in the automotive field for a very long time. I've been turning wrenches since I was 13. I've owned my own shops. I've done a lot of my own repairs. I've done builds. So yes, I've been in the industry a very long time. Just being a mechanic isn't really enough to say, look at me, I'm classified or I'm qualified. A lot of times I feel that the ASE certifications are just a piece of paper. I know a lot of mechanics are going to run me up for that, but guys, hear me out. They do that to make sure that they can only pick who they want to work in the shops, not necessarily the most experienced. I cannot pronounce that name. Hi. All right, good to see you here in chat. LM edits. My car shakes when the gear is on D. Okay, so what that tells me is when you're putting it into drive and the car shakes, you could potentially have some broken motor mounts. What I would suggest doing is no, don't apologize for the name there. It's all cool. I mean, there's some names on this site I can't even try to pronounce, and I don't want to butcher your name. So when your car is shaking when you put it into drive, that tells me that the motor is bouncing and moving. That's why you're feeling that shaking. It can also come from something being loose inside the transmission. What I would do is check your motor mounts. Those are pretty easy to do. All you do is open your hood and shake the motor back and forth, left and right. If you get any movement out of that motor and the vehicle doesn't shake as much as you're moving it, chances are you could have a bad motor mount. You'll also notice that it could move and clunk. If that's usually a good indication that you might have a bad motor mount as well. But usually that's a sign that something's moving when it shouldn't be moving. It could be something inside the transmission as well. That's why I don't want to rule that out, because there have been times that in old vehicles where I've put it into drive and I hear a sharp, hard clunk. That means that it just slammed into gear when it wasn't supposed to, or that the line pressure is not proper and it's just pounding on that transmission constantly. So two things to be careful of. One of them you can easily check. The other one you will need a transmission specialist to check out that transmission. Thomas, need more people like you. Thanks. Thank you, Thomas. Good to have you here today. So yeah, we're going to run up these internet guys on selling parts like this because this stuff is just absolute trash. We shouldn't have to deal with, when we go online and we click on something that says ceramic brake pads, getting a semi-metallic brake pad. And that's what we got on here. I'm getting a lot of brake dust on here. I've cleaned these rims twice since I put these pads in almost 2 weeks ago, and I'm still getting brake dust on it. That means those aren't ceramic pads that are in there. More than likely, there are some semi-metallic pads. And the reason that they throw the brake dust is the semi-metallics break down over pressure. That pressure throws brake dust. Gets all over the rims, all over the wheel wells. It can even spread all the way along the side of the paint. Over time, if you don't catch it or wash your vehicle enough, those semi-metallic particles actually eat into the paint, which means then you need to have it professionally corrected with a clay bar, buffed out to a shine, and restore the paint. That is a ton of work and can cost you a ton of money, and on old vehicles, it's really not worth it. This vehicle has a tremendous amount of overspray on it from the guy I got it from, because he tried to do a little rust touch-ups on the bottom. When he did that, he got overspray over the entire car. It wasn't just where he did the touch-ups. I had it on the glass, I have it on the roof, I have it on my trunk lid, the hood, everywhere. There's just overspray everywhere. So the windows were easy to clean. I just cleaned those with a razor blade. I can't do that with the paint. I've already taken it to my paint guy who I send my stuff to when I don't have time to correct it myself. And he said, I'm going to have to wet sand out this whole car, and chances are I'm not going to be able to get it all. So I had to make a choice on this old of a car. Does it pay to stick that kind of time and money and energy into it? Honestly, for me having to run it through automatic car washes, no, it doesn't. I might as well just leave it the way it is, drive the car, and when I get my next car, I'm going to try to get something a little higher quality. And actually, I've been kicking around the idea that if this one lasts me a couple years, I'm hoping to upgrade this to a sports car. What sports car, I'm not quite sure because I don't know what's going to be left available. But we are looking at doing something more performance in the future. But guys, do remember I use that thing for fuel mileage to get back and forth to work. So it's going to be a double-edged sword. I'm going to need something for fuel mileage, but I'm going to want some performance too. So I do have to balance that. The name I cannot pronounce again. I want you to know how to do things like my dad. Yes, while you're here, I'm going to show you guys a lot of these tricks and tips. Make sure you guys subscribe. There's quite a bit of videos on my channel. I always go live every Sunday about 1 o'clock. Today is something different because I spent some time with my family this weekend, and I have some time available today that I just pushed my podcast back today. And that worked really good. So I'm pretty happy that I was able to do that and make things work out. LM edits. When I steer, it have a cranking sound. Okay, so that is a completely separated issue. That sounds like a power steering pump issue. It sounds like the pump. If it sounds like the pump is running dry and it sounds really loud when you turn the wheel, check your fluid and check to see if you have any leaks in your power steering. Those are usually indications that there's something going on there. What you could also have, if the fluid is full, is the pump could be starting to go bad. Then you will have to replace that power steering pump. A lot of times those are not too horrible to do, but sometimes they can be a royal nightmare depending on where they're located and the vehicle. Again, check the resources. If you need me to do a video on it, if I can find the vehicle that you have, I could bring it in and kind of do a breakdown of what you need to do. But I'll need to know the year, make, and model in order to even see if I can find one around that I can do a video on it. Thank you, sir, for subscribing. No problem. I will definitely try my best to teach you guys all the old school tricks that have been forgotten over the years. And a lot of the stuff I learned was from my father, who grew up racing in the 70s. So he had a lot of old school knowledge. He was not very good with the fuel injection system stuff when it came out. I decided to focus on the fuel injection. And I did really well up until they started doing like the cylinder cutout stuff. There's only so much you can do with that system without having the exact software from the manufacturer. So you can't program, you can't adjust, you can't do anything. A lot of the older school stuff you could, as long as you could get into the computer and as long as it accepted bi-directional tuning, you could retune that vehicle to get better performance. Oftentimes you're stuck with whatever the manufacturer gave you, and then you just got to play around with it the best you can and try to optimize what you have. LM, thanks for your tips. No problem, sir. Hopefully that helps you. I would look into those things. Like I said, shake that motor really good. If the motor moves, you got a bad motor mount. If the motor isn't moving and it's still loud, it could be in the transmission. As far as power steering, check for leaks. Make sure it's full, and if the pump is making noise, then you're going to have to replace the pump. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and make a clip here for you guys later. Okay, so what we're talking about is cheap online parts. We can get brake pads pretty cheap. You can get them for like 40, 30, 40 bucks. They may say ceramic, but they're not. They're actually semi-metallic or even just a straight up, I don't want to say asbestos pad because that's not what they are anymore, but pretty close. Those are the super cheap pads. Anytime you buy super cheap pads, you get brake dust and you get squeaking. Those are two indications that you got the wrong parts. Now, you can go and try to fight these online parts people, and I've tried, trust me. Oftentimes it's not worth it, especially when they sell you a package of rotors and pads. Oftentimes what they're charging you for is the rotors. They throw the pads in for free, and half of the time they're not what they say they are. So I have chosen to upgrade and buy actual ceramic pads that I will be replacing in the Malibu. I will be changing these out. Malibu Steel will get a brand new set of pads yet again, just to avoid having brake dust. I hate having brake dust on rims because it gets to be so difficult to clean off. If you just only have time to run your car through a basic car wash or even the more expensive car washes, it doesn't necessarily get your rims as clean as they should. And when you have extra material being thrown on your rims, if you have expensive rims, you don't want anything but ceramics. You do not want brake dust on expensive rims. It will eat into them and mess them up quickly. It's important to not have the cheap stuff. You got to buy the good quality. This also, like I said, a few years ago, this came out with spark plugs being knockoffs. And what was happening was they were cheapening the material put inside the plug, so it wasn't carrying the resistance through like it should. When that happened, a lot of people had issues with their motors. They would go online, they would buy the plugs, they'd put them in, expecting the vehicle to run better, and it actually ran worse. That is because the plugs were knockoff plugs. They were not designed, or they were not OEM specified plugs. They were some cheap, overseas made plug that was not made to any specification. It only had the proper thread pattern, is all it had to screw into the head. That's it. They just made sure they tapped it right so it went into the head. Those were a huge topic for the longest time. A lot of people were actually getting the plugs and they were able to wipe off the print that was on the top of the porcelain. You're not supposed to be able to wipe that print off because it's cooked into the porcelain. When that is done, and those, whether it says Champion, E3, whatever the case might be, auto lights, if it has the colors or lettering, it's supposed to be baked into that porcelain. If you can wipe it off with your finger, you got a knockoff plug. Brakes are a little harder to tell. You can maybe tell by the color of the pad, because you can see the metal frame here is black. The pad is kind of a grayish color. When it's a semi-metallic, this is going to be closer to the color of this, and that's what's in the Malibu. So not only do I have that, but I do have this little hint to tell me something else is going on. What we try to do is find the good parts and then let you guys know where to get them. The rotors so far have been really good quality. So the ones I bought on Amazon, great quality rotors so far. They have not warped. I've had a few hard braking, and it gets into a little story I have for you guys that happened earlier last week. Earlier last week, I was driving to work. For whatever reason, my headlights were not stretching far enough, and I did not notice the dead raccoon. And I hit the dead raccoon and busted up all the plastics underneath the front bumper of the car. So all my plastics underneath there are currently all busted up. I've gone through and I've already placed orders for my new wheel liners, and I do have to replace the front bumper splash dam. So I do have to replace that piece as well. Those two pieces got really busted up. So the wheel liner on this side got broken really bad, and that front splash guard under the bumper got broken up. So those are pieces that I'm going to be replacing, and that's something I'll be doing when I shut this car down for the winter. So if you guys haven't watched enough of my content to know that I do live in northern climate, I do live in the Rust Belt. I got to deal with snow, cold, and ice. This car is horrible in snow and ice. I know some people say, well, I got one and I can get through. Yeah, you can get through, but it's not very good. You know, it doesn't have good footing. It doesn't have ground clearance. So if you're going through any snow, it's a trash car. I mean, you don't have any kind of ground clearance, and you hit any kind of snow drift, you're coming to a stop. That's why I have my GMC Jimmy. Crimson Vortec was a purchase that I made a few years ago. You guys probably if you look back far enough, you'll see it on the channel. I did a lot of work on that truck. I'll be doing breakdowns on all the vehicles when I start swapping stuff around this fall. So this fall, this one's getting tucked into storage. This one's getting tucked into the shop, and I'm going to tear this one down. And some of the tear downs that I have to do is obviously fix those parts that I just broke last week. But I also need to do a timing chain on this vehicle. Malibus have the 1.4 liter is a good engine, but the timing chain has to be replaced before 160,000 miles. If that timing chain breaks, it will take out the motor. This is a $2,000 motor in this car. I don't want to destroy this motor since this motor is a good running engine. It doesn't burn oil. It does really good. It's got good fuel mileage. I don't want to lose any of that. So I need to get in there, fix that timing chain, and make sure that I can drive it for another 130,000 miles. Then at that point, I'll decide what the body's like and what's left of it and if it pays to keep it around. So those will be things I will look into when that time comes. But this winter, that's some of the repair. Some of the repair is going to be engine stuff with timing chain. We're going to get into, I'll probably do an alternator because the alternator in this one is located in a really bad spot. And I don't want to have to go back in there and take a bunch of stuff apart to change out an alternator when I'm right there. To me, that just, it's foolish. All right, I'm going to go after the shops here. Fudge you guys. I'm going to go after shops who will only go in and do repairs based on what they see. They won't actually look at the bigger issues that are surrounding the vehicle. And I do have an example of this. I work on one of my neighbor's vehicles, and this vehicle went in for a transmission. The transmission was going out. Their warranty covered the transmission, but the shop failed to call the customer and tell them that their rear main seal was leaking. Rather than calling the customer, they slapped the rebuilt or remanned transmission into the truck, gave it back to the customer. I got back, or it came back to me for an oil change, and I told my customer, I'm like, here's the deal. You took this in for a warranty. They did the warranty, but they never told you that your rear main seal was leaking. A 5-minute phone call, and for you to decide whether or not it was worth you putting a rear main seal in, could have saved you thousands of dollars. It would have saved you from having to pull the transmission back out of the vehicle just to be able to replace that main seal and put it back up in there. These are the things that I call out the shops on when they start doing shady practices like this. They only focus on the warranty work, what they're going to get paid for, and they don't think farther down the road. This rear main seal was clearly leaking before it went in, and they did not do anything about it. A simple phone call to the customer could have said, okay or no. That's all it would have had to be. But they chose to go the cheaper route and, well, it's only under warranty. That's all we're going to do. Chance to maybe make some more sales, a chance to be able to do the repair properly and not have any issues. But they didn't do it. This is starting to become common practice in the automotive industry, along with us getting shoddy parts. There are shops out there. Heads up, guys, if you ever run into this, make sure you call out the shop. Make sure you let people know what happened to you. If they try to sell you the expensive parts, but later on you find out that they put the cheap parts in, this has been a scam that has happened many, 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 many times. I've walked into many shops and I've caught them doing it, where they tried to sell me the ceramic expensive brake pads, only to find out that they were going to put in the cheap pads. Pads come in 3 different grades usually. For the most part, you'll always be able to get 2 options for brake pads, but many times it's 3. The first option is a super cheap pad that wears away quickly and doesn't wear properly. It's super cheap, designed with crappy materials that fail really quickly. Next, you have the semi-metallics. Semi-metallics means that it has some metallic particles in the pad to help with braking, but they use a very cheap padded material to cover that semi-metallic. Lastly, you have the ceramic pads. Ceramic pads are 100% ceramic and don't have any of the semi-metallics in it. This is the higher quality pad, and you always pay more money for it. So, going forward, if you guys see stuff like this and shops doing shady work like that, call them out on it. And I would honestly not go back to them and tell people not to go to them, because that is a scam that a lot of the industry has done for a long time. I really hate to call out the shops like that because, guys, we're all trying to make money. We're all trying to work hard. But you don't do it by being shady. I don't care who you are. Don't be shady. Do it right. Do it the best you can. And I already know some of the shops are going to be like, well, why are you telling people how to do a pad slap? Okay, here's the deal. I tell people that they can get away with it one time, and that's only if their rotors are not warped. So you need to check to make sure your rotors are not warped. If they aren't, you can get away with one pad slap. Now, there is a break-in period when you do a pad slap. I do need to cover that. So let me cover what a pad slap is real quick. Pad slap is where you're going to keep your rotor, keep your calipers, you're going to clean up your brackets, check your slide pins, grease everything back up, and you're going to put new pads on used rotors. You can only get away with this if your rotors are in good shape, they're not grooved, and they're not warped. Usually, you will only get away with this one time. If you can get away with it one time, you'll save a little bit of money on the rotors, but oftentimes the rotors are not that much more expensive, and it's worth just putting new rotors in. If you know that you have good rotors, though, you can get away with one set of pad slap and then change out all the components. Some people, some of the mechanics have already said, why don't you just micron out the rotors and see if they're within spec? Here's the issue. You could be in spec, but the rotors could be so heat sinked that they're almost at the point of having a catastrophic failure. If you live in a major city and you're braking extremely hard, that tells me that your rotors are near the point of having to be replaced, even though they're not wore down to the minimum specification. Even if you grind them and re-straighten them, you still have that heat soak damage in the rotor. It isn't a brand new rotor. And that is the bigger issue. Some shops are going to tell me, well, why don't you just replace all of the brakes, including the calipers, including the brackets, everything. That's what we do. The shops that do that, two things. One, they're trying to make money because it's more parts. More parts equals more money, equals more labor, because they have to take the brake calipers, they have to take the lines apart, they have to rebleed the entire brakes. Labor, 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 labor. So hopefully you guys are following this technique so far. Second of all, they're doing it because they're afraid of liability issues. They would rather err on the side of caution and cost you money to make sure that you won't ever come back to them on something. That's why they're doing it. It isn't, I don't want to call that shady work, but you're definitely trying to run up the bill and cost your customers more money, especially if you know something is doable. Oftentimes, if a shop has been working on a vehicle for a long period of time, they will be familiar with how that person drives and what kind of work they've done to the vehicle. I usually have a very good working relationship with all of my customers, so I know exactly what that vehicle is when it comes in because I've seen it before. It's not something new to me. When a new customer comes to me, somebody who I've never worked on their stuff before, I will severely look that vehicle over up and down, left and right, make sure that things look the way they're supposed to look. If they don't, I advise the customer to fix these things that are out of specification or might not be right. Once we fix those, I make a note of those in the repair and say, okay, this has been done, this has been corrected. So then I can look back at that particular customer's notes and go, okay, we did a brand new set of rotors and pads on this a year ago. They do a lot of city driving, the brakes are getting worn down quickly, so we're gonna go ahead and replace the pads. I'll only do that if I was the one who knew that I did the rotors. So if I know that I did it, I will take the chance to do a pad slap if I know that all the components are good. If they're not, I'm going to dial it back and I'm going to say, okay, guys, we are going to do new rotors here because I have never dealt with this vehicle before. I don't know the last time they were done. I don't know who did them. And I don't know what kind of service intervals you guys are running on this. So I have to err a little bit on the side of caution. I also warn them that if I go to take anything apart, if anything looks weird in the caliper or anything doesn't feel right in the bracket, that they are going to get new calipers and brackets at that point. Because I'm not going to go and put all new components in and then have a caliper lock up on them. That is also really bad. You spend all that time and money putting all those new components in, and you don't catch a bad caliper, and it comes right back to you. So again, I see why the shops are doing it. I also know that there are times that it's not necessary. Ben, I'd rather change the brakes and everything myself at the proper specification, but how to know if the rotors are still good? Mine are kind of new, but on top of the rotors are rusty. Okay, so if the tops of the rotors are super rusty and it's rusty down inside the fins for the rotors, chances are I'd probably replace them because they probably have gone through more than one pad slap. If everything looks solid, like the rotor still has a lot of material left on it, it's not wore down, it's not grooved, because that's the other thing. You cannot pad slap grooved rotors, because to break your pads in, your new pads, to grooved rotors that are not designed to be grooved, where a rock got in it and cut a groove into it, you can't get that pad to seat properly. And when you go to stomp on the brakes, what'll happen is it won't make full contact on that rotor, and it'll increase your stopping distance. This is the other reason why a lot of shops are just not willing to pad slap, because they want to make sure that your vehicle stops at the specification that it was required from by the factory. Again, I don't hate them for doing it, but at the same time, I try to work to save my customers money when I can. If it doesn't look safe, I'll flat out tell them it's not safe. I don't feel comfortable. We're not doing that. But you got to have a shop that's willing to have that conversation with their customers and to let them know, okay, this is where we stand. I have customers that have tight budgets. You know, it's a tough time for a lot of people with interest rates being high, food prices being high. There's a lot going on. But yes, that's exactly what it is. You know, you got to be able to look at the bigger picture of what your customer needs, how you can properly help your customer and get them the parts that they need and repair the vehicle. Like I said, I do have customers that are on tight budgets. So oftentimes when I do an oil change, if there was something minor that they needed fixing, that was throwing a check engine light, we may or may not do it at the time of that oil change. Sometimes they'll have to wait a month or two, and then they'll bring it back to me, and then I'll do that repair. But oftentimes I try to look at what it is. I don't like to just throw parts at it. A good example of that is one of my customers was having a brake issue. They were thinking, well, we need to do pads and rotors. And part of me was like, I thought we just did pads and rotors. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And it was throwing a light. So I'm like, okay, there was no wire on the pad. Some pads will come with a wire that will tell you when the pad is low, and it'll throw a light. Guys, be careful when you're doing brakes. If you have a brake setup like that, make sure you check to see how you have to reset the pads. Some of the newer stuff gets a little crazy with this. Also on Ford F-150s, any newer Ford F-150s, you guys have to back the parking brake off. If you don't back that off properly, you will destroy a $2,000 caliper. So anytime you have an electronic e-brake, see how to back that off safely before you do the brakes. Do not press those pistons in, and do not get on and crank them hard. Make sure you look at each caliper and how they're designed. It doesn't hurt to look up a video or drop me a message, and if it's a vehicle that I can get my hands on, I'll do a brake job for you guys so you guys have all the info. That's probably the best way I can tell you to go about with that setup. As far as answering your questions, how do you know if you should reuse the rotors? It is really by look. So you have to look and see, is it grooved? Check the rotor on a flat surface, meaning take it off the vehicle, set it on a perfectly flat surface, and see if it wobbles. If it wobbles, it's warped. Cannot use it. So those are two things to check to see if the rotors are good. If it's super rusty, rotors are not that cheap. I would go ahead and replace it. Ben, true, because my car is a '01 Toyota Solera GEM of a car, and when I keep it in good shape, I am also a mechanic. I may not say this, but if the brake fluid is between max and minimum, line, you can add brake. Here's the thing. Brake fluid is a good indication on where your pads are at. So I like to bring this up because some people don't understand this when it comes to brakes. If you're going to go ahead and do a pad slap, let's say you notice your brake fluid is low. That tells you that the pads are wore down because the pistons have moved out to be able to put that pressure on the pad. When you go to press those back in, that fluid's going to go back up into the reservoir. The issue is on newer brake systems, there is a little bit of problem with the ABS systems. If your calipers are starting to get bad and they have any contamination in it at all from the heat cycling or moisture or anything like that, and you push that fluid back up into the ABS, it actually wrecks the ABS. So sometimes you will have to crack the line and press the caliper in and push that fluid out. The problem is that creates a situation where you will have to re-bleed the brakes. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is something that you do have to be aware of when you're dealing with just doing like an old school pad slap. You don't want to be pushing moisture up into that ABS system. It will destroy it. Chaz, I got a 99 Pathfinder crank no start. I got told by the mechanic that it jumped time and they had to tear down the whole engine and see if it had jumped. Can you explain? Okay, so I believe, depending on the motor that you got, if it had a timing belt, a lot of motors nowadays have what they call interference engines. I'll show you guys one right now. That is the 3.4 six-cylinder Toyota V6. One of their most, what they call bulletproof engines. If you do the timing belt. Timing belt is very crucial on this. If you do the timing belt every 70 to 80,000 miles or every 10 years, you won't have the belt break. If that belt breaks, the timing will stop moving even though the crank is still moving. What happens is then the valves are no longer lined up properly. The bottom end of the engine slams up into the valves. It will damage the piston, the valve, the head, and potentially the block if it causes that piston to bend the connecting rod. If it bends the connecting rod, it can shove the connecting rod through the block. That is a severe amount of damage in a short period of time because of one component. I've never been a fan of timing belts. I've absolutely hated them for the longest time. But as they start building these crazy four-cylinder twin cam engines, we're starting to see a lot more of these timing belts and weird timing chain setups with timing guides that fail. That's what's on Malibu steel. Malibu steel has the 1.4 liter. That 1.4 has a guide in it for the timing chain. The guide will wear through, and if it wears through too far, it could cause it to jump. When it jumps, it will actually cause the piston to hit one of the valves. If that happens, the engine's junk. Like I was saying, this is a $2,000 engine. If you wreck this engine, to get a used one is $2,000. That doesn't include the labor to put it in and everything that you would have to go through. Honestly, if you're at the point that they're having to tear the engine down that far, you might be cheaper off just getting a used engine from the junkyard, have them redo the timing chain in it, put a new timing chain with new oil seals, especially oil pan, front seal and rear main seal, put in the new seals that are hard to get to, and put in that used engine versus that new engine. Because even if they rebuild the engine, let's say they rebuild it, put all the components back together, some of those components are going to be used components from when that belt jumped, meaning that you could potentially have issues or failures in the future due to this one event. Oftentimes I will find an engine that runs properly. I will do all the maintenance that was required at the time So like, let's say I get a motor with 100,000 miles, I'll automatically new timing chain, new oil pan seal, new front seal, new water pump, new rear main seal. Those are my main ones because those are the hardest to get to when it's back in the vehicle. Sometimes I'll put new intake gaskets in it if I'm doing an engine swap, because sometimes the intakes are extremely difficult to get off. When it's on the ground and it's right there, it's easy to do those things, put those new seals in and you drop it in, and you pretty much have a 100% reliable engine as long as you did the install properly. So what they're trying to tell you is that when that timing belt or chain jumped, it caused an interference issue. And the reason they have to tear down the whole front of the engine is they need to get at that timing chain. What I would be more concerned about is what kind of damage lies underneath that. Did the pistons hit the valves? Because if they did, you're in big trouble. Any touching, anytime a valve touches a piston, it's a teardown. It doesn't matter how lightly that touch was. It's a teardown. It has to be torn down. It has to be, everything has to be taken apart and rechecked. So that is a massive, massive repair that you're looking at. Honestly, I would consider a used engine and do all the maintenance to it before dropping it in. Chaz, again, can it jump time if you're driving 55 to 70 on the interstate and it shut down? Yes, actually, what happened was, from what you just told me, that it shut down because the chain jumped. It jumped far enough that the vehicle no longer ran properly. And yes, it can jump at highway speed. Oftentimes that's when the failures happen, because the maintenance intervals were missed. And it isn't the fault of the customer, because some of these maintenance intervals are not very clearly stated, meaning that the manufacturer is horrible, absolutely horrible, about telling people when they need to have certain things done. This has been a massive issue in the industry for the longest time, and I've absolutely hated the way that they've done maintenance records. I fight tooth and nail to find maintenance records on stuff just to know when I need to do stuff for my customers or on the vehicles that are on the channel. I want to keep them in good shape. In order to do that, I need to know when certain things need to be done. Some things are based on miles, some things are based on time. Oftentimes, you need to also have a really good shop that'll do inspections for you, meaning they're going to look over the vehicle, make sure everything's straight, make sure everything's right, and make sure you're not leaking anything. A good indication that you have something wrong is you'll see a leak. You'll either see an oil leak, or you'll see a coolant leak, or you'll see a brake fluid leak. Those are the big issues that you have a problem. Vehicles are never supposed to leak anything. If they're fixed and maintained and they work properly, they never leak a thing, ever. The only reason they leak is because maintenance wasn't done when it was supposed to be done. That's the reason that they leak. Yeah, sometimes they leak because the manufacturers use cheap gaskets that fail at certain times. That is another industry issue that I've been screaming about, is cheap materials being used in very expensive vehicles. Vehicles are no longer cheap. We have to call it what it is. Driving is almost becoming a luxury because of how much it costs to own a vehicle and do the maintenance on it. That being said, they're making them even cheaper than they made them 10 years ago. This thing right here, it's an 04 Toyota Tacoma pre-runner. It's a lot more durable than this one over here. That's a 2012 Malibu LT. This thing, I probably could break it this week if I wanted to. This one, I would have to beat on it for a long time just to do anything that would damage it. It's because of the quality of the manufacturing. Quality has really slid and it's gone downhill rapidly, almost to the point that it's pretty sad. And that's the reason I bring this up, is the quality makes all the difference when you're talking about timing and you're talking about how to keep that engine in time. And when they jump like that, it does an extensive amount of damage. And without you having the maintenance and service records to know when that needs to be done, you guys are winging it. You're hoping that it ain't going to break on you when you really don't even know that it was supposed to be done, 30,000 miles ago. Anyone that has a Toyota Tacoma with this 3.4 and that twin cam, guys, your service interval on that is 80,000 miles, max, 80,000. If you let it go to 100, it could break the belt, jump, and cause the timing to go off, and you're going to damage valves. It's an interference engine. Most engines are interference engines, meaning that the distance between the valve and the piston will overlap, meaning that if the valve sticks down fully open and the piston comes up to full top, it's going to hit. That's an interference engine. Almost every engine nowadays is interference. It has to be, because that's the only way they can generate performance, meaning that it's never designed for that piston to come up and meet that valve. It's always designed that the valve is going back in if the piston's coming up, or the valve is coming out and the piston is going down. It's meant to always have that gap in there. And when that gap gets closed for any reason, aka jump timing, they will hit. And when they hit, it's damage. So yes, to answer your question, Chaz, yes, it can jump at highway speed, and it will do an extensive amount of damage when that happens. It's a crazy amount of damage, actually. And it gets real costly real quick. Oftentimes the best bet is a motor swap. That's what I can tell you. Let's get back to our topic on hand, the cheap internet parts. So sometimes we'll go online and we'll order cheap internet parts. Why would we? Because there are a couple of things that are going on in the industry right now. One of those things that are going on is there is an issue with getting good parts. And it isn't necessarily our fault. It's the fault of the manufacturers choosing to not make those parts anymore. And this is another issue where we will have to fight this out for many, many years to come. Oftentimes, a lot of the vehicles that are made as disposable. They're not made to keep around. They're not made to rebuild. Cars nowadays are disposable. They're 100% throwaway. You drive them for so many miles, you toss them, and you buy something new. They're not meant to be tore down completely, replaced, repaired, and fixed. Cars back in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s and early 90s, a lot of those used to be able to tear it down to the bare frame, rebuild it, and bring it back up. Nowadays, with unibody cars and rust and all the other issues that happen because they're cheaply manufactured, they don't last. They go away real quick. And oftentimes it gets into a lot of my news stuff is, like the massive recall that Ford had 3 weeks ago. 775,000 cars that they were told to just stop driving. And it was all due to airbags deteriorating to where they could go off by themselves and throw metal throughout the interior. Gavin, yo, hey, Gavin, good to have you. So yeah, that was some of the big news, and there's been a lot of quiet stuff now going on ever since the big Ford debacle. It hasn't been a whole lot of, Gavin, nice Chevy, thank you. That one is actually the 2012 Malibu. We call that Malibu Steel. Over here is 04 Toyota Tacoma pre-runner, and that one is the silver Swine. We've got two more on the channel, a Kia Soul and a GMC Jimmy. So that's just to kind of give you guys a quick rundown of all the vehicles we got here. Oh, the Tacoma, yes. This one's got the 6-cylinder in it. I've talked about it here a little bit on the channel so far. As far as timing, one of the guys chatted in saying they were having an issue with the timing on their vehicle. I explained to them how timing belts are crucial to replace at the interval specified. So he said that it jumped and the engine stopped. It's a really bad thing, especially if he was at highway speed. Gavin, my dad has a Tundra. Yeah. Depending on what year Tundra, there were a couple of years where they had a few issues. Hopefully he got a good one. And yeah, for the most part, Toyota has been pretty good. They've been having some issues though. 2024. Does he have that motor that's been grenading? I have to ask you that. because if he has that motor that's been grenading, make sure he gets that checked out. Those motors are under warranty, so in basically last year and good part of this year, Toyota has had a big recall on their 6-cylinder engines. There was some machining issues in those engines where metal shrapnel was floating through the engine and destroyed some bearings. It affected over 100,000 different Toyota vehicles that carried that V6 engine. So if he has that, make sure he keeps an eye on the oil and gets it checked out. But yeah, this one has been pretty good. This one's been in my family since new. My stepdad bought it. I brought it back from where it resided down south. I went through and did a lot of work to it. Cleaned it up, did a whole bunch of exterior stuff, engine stuff, got everything straightened out. Recently we did a headrest repair on the interior. But there's been a lot done to this truck, and it's a really nice truck. It's zippy, gets up and goes. I've got no issues with that truck. I absolutely love driving it when I can get the time to drive it. This one's my daily. I drive that one daily just to get around and make sure I can get back and forth to work and save a little money in the process. That one gets 30.5 miles a gallon. This one gets 17. So it's fun to drive, but I don't like driving it every day. Gavin, no, I don't think so, because my neighbor has the 2014 Tundra and he has had it for 10 years. Also, my dad Tundra has a tune. Okay, so he might have had the V8 Tundra, or possibly, I don't know. You didn't state diesel, so I'm going to guess that he has probably the V8 model yet. If he has the V8, I think the V8s are a little bit more solid on those. It's the 6 cylinders you guys got to watch out for. So I think it was a 3.6 liter 6-cylinder. Don't quote me on that. It might have been a 3.2 or something like that. I know that motor appeared not only in the Lexus, but it appeared in other stuff. So it wasn't just in the Tundra line. It was carried throughout many different lines. V8, I think. Yes, if he's got the V8, that's a good engine. That'll hold up for a long time. Just make sure you do your tune-ups and your oil changes, and that'll be a good engine. The only thing that I would check on is the interval for the timing chain. That's it. You know, those are usually your biggest repairs, and then keep an eye out for leaks. That is the tip I want to give everyone for the day. Keep an eye on leaks. If you got a leak, figure out what it is and fix it. That is the main leading cause to multiple different issues that can cause very expensive repairs. If you don't keep an eye on what's leaking, you don't know what you have to fix. And if you don't catch it and you drain something out of oil, it damages that component completely. Meaning that if you run your engine out of oil, your engine's shot. There's nothing you can do with it. Pretty much throw it away and start over. Some vehicles are not worthy to be sticking engines into. Some are just at the point that there's no life left in them. And that's the way it is for one of my customers. They have a much older vehicle. It's got a lot of miles on it. They're trying to run it into the ground. And if they don't try to keep up on some of the minor issues, they could lose oil in the engine and cause it to fail rapidly. They're trying to get a few more years out of it. They still got payments on this thing. So they really don't want to have it fail prematurely. So that's some of the things that the best tip of the day is check for fluids. Yeah, let's see, what else, Gavin? By chance, do you have any Porsche 911, 922, Carrera, S-Aero wing in? No. I don't deal with a lot of foreign. I do work on Toyotas, some Lexus stuff. I do get some of that stuff in. As far as getting into some of the more exotic stuff, I don't see it where I live. It's not common enough to come in. So it's more or less, when stuff comes in, it's all oil changes, tune-ups, brakes, suspension components. Oftentimes I don't see any of the exotics, so your Porsches, your Lamborghinis, stuff like that. If I want one on the channel, I will probably have to buy one because there's just nobody around that has them where I live. It's a small rural area. It's not a major metropolitan area. And even if it is, some of those cars are even hard to find at that point. And a lot of times when they're buying them with a service package that includes them getting it fixed. Some of the, like, I think it's either Lamborghini or Ferrari, one of them, it's an extensive job just to do an oil change. It's a crazy amount of money. Super crazy. Gavin again, because my dad got one from Cali and it was from China. Cheap plastic. Yes. Yes, that is really what we're talking about here, is the cheap stuff that's made overseas that's sent to us to use. And I know that all the plastic shielding that I'm going to replace on this car for me hitting that dead raccoon is all going to be cheap Chinese plastic stuff. But what I have is so busted up, I can't fix it. And this gets back to what I was saying before we got into some of the chats here, is some of these parts are getting hard to find. We can't get them anymore. Manufacturers have chosen not to make them because they're not making this body style anymore. So you're not going to be able to get the parts for it. So you have to go to Amazon, eBay, Rock Auto, some of these other places. These people buy it from wherever they can get it. It doesn't matter who makes it. They will take it from them. They will put an upcharge on it and then resell it. The Amazon sellers, guys, let's be 100% honest. These are not manufacturing companies selling their stuff on Amazon. These are retail sellers. They are buying a pallet of these products, putting them up online and selling them. Oftentimes, they don't know what's in them. That is adding to this problem of us getting ceramic brake pads when they're semi-metallic or worse. And that's what my gripe has been about with this video, is that the sellers need to start looking into what are these actual parts. You want to be a responsible parts seller and you want to actually get good product out to people, stop flinging whatever cheap crap you can get your hands on and then slinging it at the customer saying that it's something that it isn't. Because in the long run, we can't go back to them and get our money back because we have to fight through the system in order to get our money back. Sometimes Amazon is pretty good and they'll just refund you and then take it back out of the seller. Other times it is an absolute nightmare. There are things I've returned that there's actually something I ordered I didn't get and I tried to get refunded, never got refunded for it. Let's just say that seller got a 1 star, because if you can't even get me my stuff, I can't buy from you. And I actually blocked that seller. I tried contacting them. They didn't reply back to me. It was a complete nightmare. That's why oftentimes I will go to parts stores due to some of the drama that has come out around Advanced Auto Parts. I do not use Advance. Just gonna put it out there. You guys can figure out why. That is a tough name to pronounce, but yeah, don't be Dominic from Fast and Furious. Always use original. Oh yeah. I remember when that movie first came out, and I seen it and I'm like, are you kidding me? Half of this crap is cheap knockoff Chinese shit. It's either going to cause the vehicle to blow up or never going to give you any kind of performance at all. It was just... And then how many times they shifted? Okay, yeah, because we got a 15-speed transmission in our cars. So, yeah. Yeah, the biggest thing is try to use OEM parts as much as possible, or stuff that exceeds OEM. And oftentimes, like these, guys, it's from Napa, okay? It's not OEM, but it exceeds OEM specifications, and they use better materials than the OEM did with the ceramic pad. So in a situation like this is a good pad. I'll be able to use this for a very long time. What's in here and what's going to come out? And I was actually thinking about doing the swap video in this video, but I decided I'm going to talk about this issue before I swap them because I want to see side-by-side comparison of what's going on. And I need time to kind of process and say what I'm going to say about it before I fully run them up the ladder. This is more or less a warning as far as what we're getting online. I am from India and you. I'm from the US here. I usually go live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Time in the US. Here, a company made a motorbike which runs on CNG and petroleum both. Yes, guys, I'll get into that in just a bit. I want to read your next text. And the mileage is 200 kilometers. Yes, let's go ahead and talk about the CNG thing. I know about this because my main job is driving a CNG truck. I'm not going to say what kind of truck it is or for who. That's not what this channel is about. I don't like to talk about those kind of things on here. Just know that I am very familiar with the CNG setups. CNG sometimes doesn't get the best fuel mileage, but it's a cleaner energy source. That being said, it's also very flammable. So having a CNG setup on something, you need to make sure you're not going to crash it. And a CNG on a bike, I'd be nervous. I don't know if I'd trust it. I mean, gasoline is a lot safer than that. And yeah, you poke a CNG tank and just even the release of the tank could cause an explosion. CNG is dangerous. No joke about it. Yes, it's green energy. Yes, it doesn't pollute. You could stand there and inhale the fumes coming out of the pipe and it will not hurt you. It's water vapor. It's heat. That's it that comes out of that pipe. There is no contamination. It is the cleanest energy we have right now is compressed natural gas. The problem with that is you have to deal with the explosion factor. You have to deal with the flammability issue. As you charge that vehicle, it does pressurize within a tank. That tank gets to a certain amount of pressure, and if it gets poked, that could cause a fire and ultimately an explosion. I've seen CNG trucks catch on fire, and they actually have a system on the trucks that causes it to burn off, meaning that it'll dump everything in the tank, burn everything off so it doesn't explode. Because if the tank gets too hot, it will raise the pressure to where it'll blow. It's better than having electric, as mine is cause more troubles and climate and earth. Yeah, I mean, the electric in my mind is not the way to go. Next one is here in cities, we rarely get to drive above 500 km speed. Yeah, so I mean, that's some of the issue too, is where you use it, how you're using it. The trucks we use it in here in the US are doing heavy work. So we do burn a lot of CNG throughout the day. Usually our tanks are pressurized to 3,600 PSI, which is a lot among a fuel tank, but it's compressed natural gas. So it has to be able to store a huge amount in order for that vehicle to travel any kind of distance and do any kind of heavy work. As far as being better for the environment, honestly, when it comes down to it, electric's not any better than gas. They've been trying to say that it is, and it's not. It's clearly not. The environmental impact that it takes to build those batteries, install them, dispose of them when they're gone, it's not better for the environment. It never was. That part of it is a straight up scam. There are other energy sources out there that are more energy efficient, that are better than the electric and the gas. I will say that. As far as fixable and reliability wise, gasoline is still the easiest to fix. and for the most part, more reliable. Want to see. BKD. My Chevy was in the shop, would not throw code. Mass airflow sensor was made in China. Got OEM and it ran fine. Yes, that is a really good example. Thank you for bringing that up, because sensors are another issue that we're running into cheap parts that are not built correctly. Sensors are very crucial. Mass airflow sensors, map sensors, O2 sensors, all of these you want to buy US made products in. You do not want to buy the cheap knockoffs. And if you have an option to buy the expensive or the cheap one, always buy the more expensive. I know it's a little bit more in the budget, but there's a reason they're selling it cheap, because they made it with cheap parts. And you're going to pay for it. There's times that it might work, but there's a lot of times that it'll throw a code or it'll do something that it's not supposed to do. So BKD, that was a good one. Thank you for bringing that up. We have CNG trucks from Ankara. Yeah, I cannot pronounce those names. I am from the US. It is clear I cannot pronounce those. Here, Gov is planning on shifting to ethanol soon. Okay, so let's talk about ethanol real quick. Ethanol has its own issues, guys, and ethanol is doing a lot of damage to US vehicles, and they're not telling you guys that in foreign countries, and they're trying to push these ethanol fuels because they're trying to use corn to produce the ethanol. A lot of corn is made in the US. I know I'm probably going to get censored for this all over the place, but I don't care. I'm here to give you guys accurate information and reliable information and not lie to you. Ethanol does damage to vehicles. It damages the fuel systems. It damages the catalytic converters. It does a whole lot of things that are not good. It can prematurely wear out spark plugs. It can cause a whole bunch of carbon buildup issues. Ethanol is not good. Anyone that's running a turbocharged engine right now, GM, you guys run that 1.6 turbo. Stop running 87 or 88 octane in it. The ethanol content is too high for a turbocharged engine. You need to run 91 non-oxygenated, because what's happening is that ethanol is burning and getting lodged in your catalytic converters, plugging up your catalytic converters, causing you to have to put in a new catalytic converter. That is a horrible setup, and nobody's talking about it. So I will, because I already have proof of it, and I have a vehicle that will be coming in either this fall or next spring that I have to do a repair because of ethanol fuels. And I will show you guys that. BKD again. Part shop put on was $30. I bought OEM and put it on myself in 5 minutes. Yes. Again, guys, always pay attention to some of these basic things. I'm always honest with my customers. Unfortunately, I do a minimum half-hour charge. My labor rate is really low for the US. It actually is. I'm probably half of what a normal shop is nowadays. Normal shops are well over $100, and I'm half of that. So I do have a minimum charge that I do on vehicles when I'm just replacing something that's super simple to get to. I can swap it out in a few minutes. I do a minimum charge, but yeah, I can understand why shops are doing that. They need to pay the bills, keep the lights on. They got to pay for stuff that is, electricity to run their air equipment, all of that stuff, towels, all that stuff costs money. So I can understand that. If it's something simple that you guys can do, that's why I'm here, guys. That's why I'm here to teach you guys this stuff, show you, hey, so there's going to be something coming in. That's going to be one of these very, very simple things. Let me explain to you what it is, and then you guys will see it when the vehicle actually does come in. Hopefully in about a week or so, I might be doing an oil change on a customer vehicle and replacing a sensor. That sensor is going to be located on the brake booster. And what it's designed to do is tell you how much pressure is in that brake booster. Stupid simple sensor. Take maybe 10 minutes to replace with a new rubber grommet. But yeah, they're going to charge that minimum fee. And honestly, a $30 fee to swap out a quick sensor, I can understand why they're doing it. So it's not that they're trying to overcharge you. It does kind of sound like they slashed their labor rate to do it. So that's not horrible. But always double check the work. Always double check what you need to have done and compare it. If it doesn't sound right, then check into it and maybe do it yourself. Jose, what you working for? Forerunner behind you. Oh, yeah, what you're seeing here is my Toyota Tacoma. This is a 04 Toyota Tacoma pre-runner. And the only reason that the hood is up on it is I was just checking all the fluids after running it today. I took it out for a quick drive. This one's pretty much done. The only thing I might want to do is leather seats in the future. So that might be a video I'll be bringing you guys. But for the most part, I've done a lot of stuff to this that's already pretty much done. I am looking at rims and tires on this, but a lot of the stuff that I do on the channel is just stuff I do as I go with stuff I work on for my vehicles or potentially my customers. But no, this one, this is a Toyota Tacoma. It's got the 6-cylinder in it. It's a good, reliable vehicle. I like it. You say new SUV launched by Force Motors. I have not seen that. I'm going to look into that. So I'm going to look into Force Motors and see what they're about. I want to see what that's all. Anytime that there's a new product out or a new vehicle, I like to look into them and see what they might be doing right and what they might be doing wrong. So I will definitely look into them. Does your dad still go? Not unsure what you mean by that. So get back to me what you mean by does your dad still go? Jose, Forerunner behind you. What is it you are working on? No, I'm not. This one I'm not working on. This one I was just doing a checkup and a tune-up. This one is the vehicle that we're talking about, and what the conversation of this topic is buying what are supposedly ceramic brake pads online and getting semi-metallics or worse. So the only reason you're seeing this one behind me is just it's the backdrop right now. I'll probably turn you here so it's a little bit easier for you guys to kind of correlate what's going on. But yeah, for the most part, today's video is about these brakes that I did a few weeks ago. And you guys can go back and check out that live later on. It's pretty much all about trying to do your brake jobs correctly and trying to save yourself a little bit of money in the process. We hate spending a bunch of money to do a bunch of things we don't need to do, but there are times that it's warranted, and you have to check all your components and make sure they're good before you start tearing into stuff. If you just tear into it and you don't know what you're looking at, you can put the vehicle back together with bad parts and wreck your brand new parts. Unfortunately, they sent me ceramic, or they sent me what was supposed to be ceramic. They sent me semi-metallics, and I'm getting a ton of brake dust and they're squeaking. Not what they advertised. So be careful on Amazon, guys. That's my big motto here. At least my big saying for today. Car I told you about from Force Motorsports got pre-installed snorkel. Okay, so that means that it's designed for off-road. Okay, I'll check that out. Jose, thanks for letting me know about ethanol gas. Yes, ethanol, guys, stay away from it as much as possible. Ethanol works for one reason and one reason only. You're using it as daily driver fuel to go to and from your job, putting on a lot of miles where you just need cheap fuel. It is not good for the engine. It's not good for the fuel injectors. It's not good for fuel filters. It's not good on fuel pumps. And it's definitely not good on catalytic converters. If you're going to store a vehicle, I've said this before, I'm going to say it here now. I'm going to record this one as a clip for you guys later on. If you guys are going to store a vehicle, make sure you run non-oxygenated fuel. The reason that you're doing this is ethanol fuels degrade over a 2-month period. So from the time that they put it into the ground to where it gets pumped out of that and into your car, you have 2 months to use up that fuel that you put in that car. If you go to a gas station that hasn't gotten fuel regularly, what can happen is the fuel that's down in that tank is separating. Ethanol fuels separate. They will get water in them. That water can get pulled into your fuel system and can damage your entire fuel system, including injectors, including fuel lines. It can cause rusting. It can damage fuel pumps. So a lot of times when I've seen fuel pumps have issues, it's because guys are running garbage fuel and they're not running it out regularly. The Toyota that you guys seen over here, I park that all winter long. So I only run 91 octane in that truck. 91 octane, non-oxygenated. The reason I'm doing that is because it will sit for long periods of time. The longer it sits, the better chance the fuel is going to go bad. Anytime I leave a vehicle sit for more than a month, I run through one full tank of 91 before I put it away. And I fill my tank with 91 so I don't get moisture inside the tank. Because when you fill it up and run it down and there's barely anything left, if you live in a climate that has any kind of climate change, like it gets warm and cold, I'm not talking the whole other thing. If you have temperatures that fluctuate where you live, what'll happen is you'll get condensation and rust inside that fuel tank. Filling it will keep that from happening. So because I live in a climate that gets really cold in the wintertime, I fill my tank before I park it for the winter. That is done to keep rust out of the fuel tank. Let's see what we got here. I read that one. Your cap's got a symbol of a Hydra or from Ben 10. Actually, this one is a symbol created from the Blaze. It is about a special that they did that talks about the deep state. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we have to pay for, and we have to have an understanding what's going on. And the reason that I wear this is because a few people will notice it. I've only had one person ever tell me where it was from. And yeah, it's kind of a wake-up call for us to pay attention to what our politicians are doing. And if we don't like what they're doing, vote their ass out. I mean, that's really what it is. Our current political system in the U.S. is absolute dumpster fire. And the only way we're going to fix it is to flush out people that are in politics. They need to be changed often. We should very rarely be re-electing people into positions. Things are that bad in our country now that this is just kind of where we're at. I don't like to bring up politics, but when somebody does point out the hat, I do bring that up. So thank you for bringing that up. Jose, nice to have a mechanic live. Yes, guys, I try to do this every Sunday at 1 p.m. Make sure you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit the like button on all the videos. It really does help the channel. I'm trying to grow my stuff. I do repairs at the same time. Today was more or less, I'm calling out Amazon sellers. So there really wasn't much I could do as far as repair, except for maybe tear this down and swap these pads out. But I want to do that on my own because there's something I'm going to check before I decide to do a part 2 to this video. So before I do a part 2 to the live, I'm going to find out what happened and why I have such a severe squeak on my driver's side front. And I want to know that before I decide to completely trash them. But I'm trashing them today because there are 2 things that I noticed. Number 1, the squeak. Number 2, the brake dust. Brake dust doesn't happen on ceramic pads. Does not happen, period. I don't care what ceramic pads you buy. If you buy ceramics, they do not throw brake dust. So if it's throwing brake dust, you got sold bad pads. Oh, Hail Hydra. Yeah, we don't want to be doing that in the U.S. Trust me. We don't want to be bowing down to our government anymore. That's where it stands. In fact, they sold our ass upriver, so heck with them. And they don't care about us to begin with. Hope someone invited the engine running on biogas so we have toilets instead of car seats. Keep shifting, keep going. Yeah, I mean, we're just going to have to see where the future of automotive goes. I don't like the fact that we're trying to take 4 cylinders and pumping crazy horsepower out of them. I don't think it's a good way to go. We're going to start seeing a lot of turbos failing. We're going to see a lot of engine failures, things that are going to break that weren't normally breaking before because we're pushing these engines to their max all the time. And that's just to use them on a basic application. So I've brought this up in so many different videos over the last year even some of my reels kind of got into some of those, and I stopped doing reels and I did some news clip stuff here on YouTube, just some quick post stuff, so you guys might see some of those when I start getting back into it. But for the most part, yeah, it's just we're going to see a whole lot of stuff over the next couple of years that are all because manufacturers were so worried about getting fuel mileage and cutting everything down that we're going to pay the price for these repairs. We're going to be eating costs. We're going to be having to pay for turbos. We're going to have to pay for catalytic converters prematurely failing. We're going to have maintenance and mechanical issues that we didn't see before. There's an issue on the Buick Encores that a simple valve cover going out causes issues with the engine not idling properly. That's because of the crazy designs that they put into some of these engines nowadays. It's just causing us to do a whole bunch of dumb stuff that we shouldn't have to do. This valve cover, that job will be coming in, either, like I said, either this fall or early spring. It all depends on when the customer wants to get it out, start using it and driving it again. But yes, you guys are going to see a horrible bad design when it comes to that. That valve cover will have to come completely off. I'm actually going to be swapping that valve cover with an upgraded aluminum one and get rid of the plastic, because the plastic deteriorates over time, it cracks, it doesn't hold the vacuum, and on that particular engine, it has enough pressure at the top of the engine that if it leaks, it throws codes and doesn't run right. So again, on that, we're probably going to be doing a set of plugs. I'm going to be checking coils, all of that. It's going to be a full tune-up on that deal. I use AMSOIL for motor oil. You know what? I am hooked up with AMSOIL. I do sell AMSOIL as well. So guys, if you guys want me to start putting some of that stuff up there, I can try to do that. I just haven't done a whole lot with my store as of yet because I need to figure out what I can do with it, what I can, how I'm going to do the shipping side of things. So I'm still playing around with a lot of that. But yes, AMSOIL does have some good lines of stuff. Here's the thing. When it comes to engine oil, I always swap my oil every 4, maximum 5,000 miles. Doesn't matter what it is, what the oil is, what the filter, I always swap it, because it's not that the synthetic breaks down. The new synthetics don't break down, ever. But what happens is the engines get so much contamination in them that oil grabs that contamination. And the more contamination it grabs, the more it gets into the oil. So by flushing that oil out and changing it, I can make sure that I keep the contaminants out of the engine. And that's the reason why I do my oil changes. That for full synthetic, it's 4,000 to 5,000 max. On conventional, I would never go over 3. Doesn't matter. Never over 3 if it's a conventional oil. The AMSOIL, they do have a line that they say lifetime oil. I'm not 100% confident with it. I'm not. And I sell the stuff. I do. If somebody wants it, I'll get it for them. Not a problem. But I don't feel comfortable with it. I do like to swap that oil because of the contamination that oil does grab. I just got done doing an oil change on this and pulled the filter, pulled the fluid. My oil life monitor said I was only at 67%, but I changed the oil because I have 4,000 miles on that oil. And when I pulled it, it was black. It was, how about I don't damage my brand new pads before I put them in? It was that color. So that was off of 4,000 miles on a full synthetic. So that's why I replaced it. BKD, I agree. Buy parts from Napa or dealer elect. Get a ton of junk online. Yeah, there's so much junk online, and it's just that we have to be so careful what we get. Yeah, I did drop the pad and ship it. Little bastard. It's all right. I'll fix it with a file. I'll do it on my vehicles. If it would be a customer, they'd go out and buy a new set of pads, but no, it's on mine, so I won't care. I'll just file it down a little bit so it doesn't grind and catch. But yeah, buying online parts, guys, it's gotten really shitty out there. It's gotten bad. For the most part, it's a buyer beware market. I would tend to lean away from brake pads, spark plugs, injectors. Those items go to a quality internet or a quality auto parts store and stay away from the internet. Do not go to the internet for those items because they're not built with any kind of quality. They're just cheap, out-of-country parts that are slapped together and do not actually meet the OEM specifications. And on that, make sure you get the parts that are designed properly. I've had it even at auto parts stores where the parts are not designed properly. If you're questioning how it looks, my best advice is if you're going to do brakes, take your brakes apart, take a set of pads, take a rotor with you. When you get to the auto parts store, do a side-by-side comparison. Make sure they look the same before you go home. The worst feeling in the world when working on cars is spending the time to go to the auto parts store just to turn around and get there, get back, and realize they gave me the wrong part. Or it says it's the right part on the box, but somebody misboxed it. I've had both happen. Jose, I use a 96 4Runner for a daily driver. Yep, so you're using basically the 4Runner version of the Tacoma, which is pretty much the same drivetrain, just a little bit shorter. And yeah, it could be a really good daily driver. Just make sure you do the maintenance on it. I know that mine, the 6-cylinder has a timing belt in it. The timing belt has already been replaced in mine. It is a necessary repair at about every 80,000 miles. It has to be done at 80. So if you do have that timing belt in there, if it's a twin cam V6, you are going to have a timing belt. Make sure you get that timing belt replaced, because if it jumps, breaks, or cracks, again, this is getting back to a previous comment that we made. Those have to be fixed and have to be repaired. So I'll give you guys a little bit here to chat in some more stuff before I get into the news, and then go ahead and wrap this up, and then I'll fill you guys in on some of the stuff that we've got coming up in the next couple weeks. So just giving you guys a little bit of time to chat some stuff in if you need to. Just want to say thank you guys for tuning in on this Monday. Normally I go live every Sunday, 1 p.m. Central. And I do normally have mods in here that are monitoring chats and helping to answer questions. A lot of times if there's specific torque specs that you guys need, the mods will actually look up the torque specs and give them to you, because if I'm on here with you guys, I don't have another device to look up those torque specs. Sometimes if it's something I have off the top of my head, I'll give it to you, but a lot of times I look up exact torque specs to make sure that they're correct. But yes, every Sunday, 1 p.m. is when I go live, and that's U.S. Central Time that I'll do that. Anything about 04 GMC Sierras? I can go for days. What do you need to know? I've owned several. In fact, I think I've owned like 3 or 4 of them. I've also owned the GM equivalent Silverados as well. So a lot of those are interchangeable. I've dealt with a lot of different models in those, and even up to some of the newer stuff. So what are you having issues with there? Brodog 8 802, Road Dog 802. What are you having issues with? Let me know. I'll give you a little bit to chat that in. Those years have definitely quite a bit going on, especially when they start having issues. A lot of those are the first gen LS engines, 5.3s. A good solid engine, don't get me wrong, but they do have their problems. One of the big issues with those is those 5.3s, those old 5.3s have an issue with losing compression. And when they lose compression, they don't want to start. So that's usually one of the big issues that I always talk to people about on those. Jose, my odometer doesn't read on the 96 4Runner. I can't really tell my mileage. So should I get time change every what? So do you know roughly how many miles you're putting on the vehicle daily? If you know how much you're putting on daily, you can base it kind of off of that. If you haven't done it in a long time, I would go ahead and get it done. So if you haven't done anything timing wise on it since you've owned it, I would go ahead and get after it. If it's something where you had it done, but you don't quite know where it's lining up at, it doesn't hurt. Sometimes there's an inspection cover and you can pull the inspection cover back and look at the belt. I know on my 3.4 liter 4Cam, I do know that I can remove one of the covers or pull one of the covers back and it'll give me access to it and I can see it. That's only if you have the timing belt though. If you have a timing chain, oftentimes they're buried behind a cover that you have to pull apart. So again, if I knew your particular engine, I could look into it more and try to let you know more about it. But I need to know exactly what engine you'd have in that vehicle. Still kind of waiting here for Brodog 802 to get back to me on his issue that he was having. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift into the news here. If he does chat in, I'll just pause and I'll go right into it. So the news lately is there's been a lot of talk about some of the newer vehicles coming out. We are getting to that point now that a lot of the stuff that we've seen earlier in the year is starting to come to the dealerships now. We're still seeing a lot of recalls coming out of the Ford camp. They're having a lot of issues trying to meet these recall issues. Also trying to tell people to stop driving the 2000 styles Mustangs, Rangers, and Explorers. These had defective airbags that would throw shrapnel throughout the interior and would go off randomly. So if you do have one of those vehicles in that year, make sure to see if your vehicle applies. If it does, I can't tell you how to disconnect it, but there is something you can do. I'll leave it at that. That being said, what we have to do is look at the bigger picture. Where are these manufacturers going in the next couple of years? What's going to happen? And as we look at it, certain industries are starting to die down. Certain ones are starting to dial back. There was a big giant push for EVs, and now all of a sudden it's being dialed way back. Ford took $9 billion from the federal government to build 3 battery plants. They've built 1 battery plant and converted another one to a Super Duty plant. That was a direct spit in the government's eye. Now, maybe to get in the government's good graces again, they decided to play around with some tech and get a patent on their vehicles being able to report speeders directly to the police that would allow the police just to write a ticket and mail it to you. If this tech goes through, this is going to be a bad thing for every Ford owner and everyone who passes a Ford on the road. They were talking about using the cameras that were outside the vehicles to record people that were driving past and speeding, and then using those pictures to generate the ticket. The issue comes down to if they can't get a clear picture of the driver and confirm who the driver is, then the tickets can get thrown out in court. And this is a big issue that they had with every traffic camera lately in the last how many years, is the traffic cameras were not able to clearly identify the driver, to verify that it was the owner of the driver, and thus they had to throw the ticket out. The other issue is all the people fighting tickets jammed up the court system to where they couldn't process other crimes. So everyone who got a ticket walked into the courthouse and said, I'm here to fight this ticket, which means then they have to schedule a different court date, and that caused a huge backlog in the court cases to where they couldn't process other real crimes, stuff that was a major issue. And that just extended everything out farther and farther and farther. So some states got rid of the traffic cameras. Now, some still have them. A lot of them have either shifted and gotten away from it or have done a completely different camera setup all to begin with. But this is the problem with where we are in the US. And honestly, this is something that I knew Ford Camp was going to have to do to appease taking that money. I warned people a long time ago, when you take money from our federal government, you have to eat the cost. There's always a cost associated with it. If you promise you're going to do something, you don't do it. They're either going to come after you or they're going to make you do something you didn't want to do. That's why I'm asking, is this Vortec really Ford's tech? Or are they just being forced to use this as a monitoring system on everyone? The other issue came out of GM's big camp. And guys, I know I talked about this last week, but this whole selling of our data thing is really starting to take off some steam and causing people to question who they're going to drive and the brand that they're going to drive. Because GM decided we're going to go ahead and we're going to sell all of the private information on driving habits to insurance companies. Insurance companies then took that data and built a profile based on insurance rates that they sell to everyone throughout the US. This violated the vehicle owner's rights, meaning that this was done without the vehicle owner's permission. And I'm guessing that it was done through the OnStar system. Texas was the one who decided to file the lawsuit and push the issue. Where we're at with that, we don't have much information at this point. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be tied up in litigation for the next few months, and we may not hear a lot on it. When it does happen, it either might get swept under the rug, or it might be a quiet, we'll just pay off the customers that we sold the information, and that's what it'll be. That being said, it's going to be one of those things where people are going to have to choose on a personal level at what point do they decide to fight the system. One way we can fight that is disconnecting our OnStar systems. This thing has OnStar. This thing has satellite radio. I don't have the OnStar. I do not have the satellite radio. It has already been disconnected because somebody put in an aftermarket remote start. That aftermarket remote start they had to bypass the OnStar system to get it to work. So that's one way we can get away from having our information be so readily available. The other thing is to drive older vehicles, such as Silver Swine over here, 04 Toyota. There is no OnStar. There is no real technology on it at all. It still comes with a CD player. It might even have a cassette. No, I don't think it does. No. My 01 GMC Jimmy might have it. He'll still have the cassette player in it. But yeah, it's crazy where the tech is going, and we have to pay attention to it and wake up to some of the issues that are going to come at us. And by paying attention to the news, talking about some of the things that go on here, this is a great way for us to break down the situations that we're going to be facing in the next 5-10 years. Technology is not going to get lighter on us. It's not going to get easier on us, and it's going to get a lot harder for us to protect our personal information. In order to do that, we may have to be willing to sacrifice certain features to be able to not have our stuff spread out all over the place. BKD, Blue Oval is kind of slow down here in Tennessee. Definitely see a downturn of EV. Hoping technology doesn't get out of control. I disconnect my OnStar on 3 vehicles. Good. BKD, I think you've been with the channel for a while. Have you not? If you have, let me know. I think I saw you when I did my video that showed you guys how to disconnect your OnStar. New Ford plant. Wow. Yeah, the EV stuff is slowed way down, guys. Way down. Yes. Okay, BKD, when I get a chance, once this video finally gets fully rendered, I'm going to go ahead and wrench you up since you've been on the channel for so long. So that is, hopefully I'll get that coming your way. I got one more I have to do from last week. So whenever this one's fully processed, because I can't look at my chat and wrench it now, I have to do it after it's fully processed. Because, yeah, even if I click on it now. Oh, wait, no, I can. Let's go like that. Let's go here. There you go, man. You're wrenched up. Thank you for being loyal to the channel and being here for so long. Okay, that name I cannot pronounce. I will not say that on here. You're cute, but I'm not going to say that on here. Rex. Hey, bro. I have... Yeah, I'm not going to try to say that either. So, yeah, that's where we're at, guys, is we have to watch where the tech is going. The tech is going to get out of control. There's going to be a lot of crazy things we have to pay attention to in the next few years. And as much tech as they're pumping into it and the quality of the parts that are being produced should make us question whether or not new vehicles are even worth the cost. That first year depreciation hurts. I don't care who you are. It doesn't pay to take that first year hit. You drive it off the lot, you throw away 5-10 grand. And that depends on how expensive the vehicle was. It's just not worth it. I mean, yeah, the new stuff looks cool, but the problems that are coming out right now are crazy. Toyota with their massive recall, Ford with their massive recall on their older stuff. Ford's also had a ton of recalls on the new Mavericks. It's insane. They can't get it right. And I think Ford is going to be hurting in the next couple of years with all the recalls that are coming at them, the money that they took from the government, them slashing their EV productions. EV productions are going down rapidly. I don't care what people say. I know I have other channels and stuff on other sites, and the EV lovers are at my throat going, no, this is the way of the future. It's not. It really isn't. And we can't sustainably go to everyone driving electric. Our power grid can't handle it. We have 3 million EVs on the road right now. We have over 283 million cars on the road. We can't bridge that gap. It isn't possible. As much as I would love to say it is, it's not. BKD, let me know if you got that wrench. I haven't seen anything from you yet on that. But yeah, let me know if you get that wrench. Hopefully it went through and it clicked for you. I'm glad I was able to figure that out. I was getting kind of frustrated because there's been a few people I've wanted to add my wrench to, and I just haven't been able to get it done. But now I got an easier way to do that. Jose A from Florida. Yeah, it's good to see people from Florida in the chat. I do like Florida. I used to love going on cruises. It just got to be too expensive, and with the way the economy's been, it's been crazy. So, SoCal. Hey, I remember you from last week. I'm gonna go ahead and do this right now for you. All right, SoCal. If you get a chance, message me back. I want to see if you've got that wrench now. The reason I didn't do it last week is I was waiting for the video to fully render so I could go back and check the chats. Because as videos get uploaded here on YouTube, we have to wait for them to fully be rendered. Gotcha. You're there. Thank you, sir. You were a great help in that video when I was doing the brakes. You were on top of it. You were answering people's questions. That was awesome. I really do appreciate having good mods in here. This is kind of a rare episode, guys, me here on a Monday. It's a holiday. I wanted to spend time with my family yesterday, so I didn't make my video yesterday. I made it today. And I was glad that I was able to bring you guys at least one video a week is what I try to do. And I try to drop 3 reels Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The reels are made when I do these live videos. So I have to click the button, record the reel. I go back in and edit for you guys and do all the cool behind the scenes things. But yes, I remember you from last week. I was trying to get you that wrench, and it was like I couldn't get in there, and I finally could. So I'm glad I was able to wrench you up. Guys, as you know, I always go live every Sunday at 1 p.m. That's when I do a lot of stuff, a lot of repairs. So Cal, just to get you caught up, we were talking about cheap Amazon parts or crap you can buy online. And the reason I'm complaining, remember that brake job you were helping out so much on in the chat? Those dirty little suckers didn't sell me ceramic pads. They sold me semi-metallics. I've been getting brake dust on my rims the last 2 weeks, and I'm really kind of had it with some of the online sellers. They're slinging cheap crap, and I absolutely hate it. I like 90s and early 2000s cars only. Yeah, don't get me wrong. That's a good year before things started getting crazy, before the technology went way out of control and it became so hard to do anything. A lot of the newer stuff nowadays, the computers are locked. We can't play with the performance. So if you wanted to go buy anything after 2015 is when GM locked their computers. Anything after 2015, we can't buy a base model Camaro and beef it up to a 1LE. We can't. They locked the computers and it's just impossible. We can't do it anymore. It's actually pretty sickening that it's gone that way, but it has. So Cal, never ever buy cheap parts. Yes. Cheap parts are a Band-Aid on an emergency situation. Yes. Jose, wow. Yeah, cheap parts, huge problem. Labor Day, y'all. Yep, we're here on a Labor Day. Happy Labor Day to everybody. I'm here on the holiday, kind of spending it with you. I spent the weekend with my family, which is why I'm bringing you guys the live today. Yeah, I'm doing an extra long one, guys. I normally don't do this. I normally try to keep it around that hour range, but I'm having fun with the chat. So as long as the chats keep coming in, we're going to keep answering them, and I'm just going to roll with it. You know, if you guys keep the conversations going, we're going to keep pushing and see what information we can give out to you guys. So yeah, SoCal, you saw that video that I was working so hard to replace all the brakes on Malibu steel, and I got brake dust on every single rim. And guys that turn wrenches already know, if you got brake dust, you don't have quality ceramic pads. You got cheap shit. So yeah, rotors were awesome. Don't get me wrong, drilled and slotted rotors, nice and thick rotors, good quality. Everything seems to work great with them. They're not messed up or deformed or anything crazy. Those were awesome. Pads, on the other hand, it seems like they charged me for the rotors, but then threw whatever cheap pads were that they could buy a bulk in, tossed it in as a package, and that's what they sold. And that's what we have to watch out for when we're buying this stuff online. SoCal, brake dust leads to brake failure in the end. Yes, it does. It also leads to paint destruction down the side of the vehicle as that brake dust gets flung up on the side of the vehicle. If you have expensive rims, it will also chew into the rims and destroy the rims. So it's horrible on anything with clear coats. Jose, what a good 90 or 2000s car to get. Okay, so you have to know where you live. If you live in a rusty area or what we call the rust belt, you're going to have a hard time finding a good one that isn't rusty. Chances are, if you do, you're going to pay a little bit extra for it because somebody probably stored the vehicle and didn't drive it in the wintertime. If you're looking for something down south where you don't get a lot of rust and there isn't a lot of snow and they don't use a lot of salt, a lot of people love those Hondas. They do. The Hondas pretty much run forever. A lot of people love Hondas. You can get a few GM cars that are pretty good in that early 2000s that are pretty reliable, Pontiac Sunfires, things like that. Stay away from Saturn. Saturn had a whole lot of issues. Super cheap car, built super cheap. Oftentimes they would get a lot of carbon buildup in them, and it would cause the piston rings to become locked into the piston, which means you get a lot of blow-by in the engine. So stay away from the Saturns. Fords, they had their few, but the Taurus was an absolute dumpster fire. Don't go anywhere near a Taurus. Live from Middle East. I wonder what the best American truck like Ram or Silverado or Raptor. Okay, so let me break this down for you. Each manufacturer has its own problems. Each one has its own strengths. So the Silverado is a good kind of a cruising light duty pickup that you can use to pick stuff up, haul stuff. They're not a really heavy duty hauling truck in the half-ton models. As you get up to like the 1 tons, they do have quite a bit better towing capability, but you have to step up to at least a 3/4 ton or 1 ton to get that. Fords are good for towing, but leak a lot of oil. So, I mean, there's that trade-off there. As far as the Rams got issues up and down. I mean, they've got issues with engines. They got issues with transmissions. They got issues with frames. There's how many videos of people having broken frames on Dodges, along with them having MDS lifter failure issues. And don't get me wrong, GM has started to have some of those issues too, especially in the 07 and up models where the lifters have been collapsing and stay collapsed. So the cylinder cutouts have not been a good thing. But yes, as far as that goes, I'm not brand loyal, so I'm the wrong person to ask. I guess that would be up to the chat to decide. Jose, okay, good. SoCal, I got 2 from you. I'm going to read them both. All trucks have good and bad points. It really depends on what you want the truck for. Raptor, in my opinion, is a very don't know what you were trying to spell there. Overrated, maybe. Overrated truck. Thank you, guys. Yes, Raptor is a very overrated truck. So is the Dodge TRD. Or not TRD, sorry. Said that. TRX. The Dodge TRX is an overpriced truck. The Raptor's an overpriced truck. Honestly, the ZR2 is an overpriced truck. It really is. They're selling high-priced packages now and trying to get people to buy in. That's what this is. It's crazy that this is what's going on, but this is the state of the industry currently. Overrated. Yep. Okay, I got you. What about suspension? Okay, so if you want to talk suspension-wise, you have to ask yourself, what are you buying the truck for? As far as off-road suspension, GM has a good setup on their ZR2. Raptors are pretty decent with the off-road, but Raptors are way more expensive than even a ZR2. The TRX is very, very more expensive yet, and they're getting harder to find because Stellantis is killing off their gas-powered engine line. Meaning that we're going to see Dodge, Ram, Jeep, and Chrysler become shell companies. And they're going to be shell company for Stellantis. Stellantis bought them about 2 years ago now. When they bought this company, they bought it as a shell company. Off-road, Jose, God bless, brother. God bless you too. But yes, that is where we're at. The whole situation of the off-road suspension race comes down to who's putting the best products in at the most affordable price. I would say right now, GM has a slight advantage as far as price-wise, but it isn't going to last. Theirs are starting to creep up too. That ZR2 Silverado is crazy expensive. It said that Toyota or Tacoma a badass. Yeah, Tacoma is a badass. Don't get me wrong. These boys have been doing off-road for a very long time. That's a Toyota Pre-Runner right there. And that's an 04. So Toyota's been in the game a long time when it comes to off-roading. If you want an off-road truck that's capable, oftentimes you can get one in a TRD, and you don't even need to go with the top TRD package. You could go with the TRD mid-range and still have a very capable off-road truck. If that's what you're trying to go for, and you won't pay the 60 plus price tag that goes with that. Now that is in US price, that it can be different in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, I should say. But in the US, it's, yeah, if you're near that 60K, you are in an off-road truck, but if you're in a half ton, you're way above that. You're pushing closer to that 90K range for a capable off-road half-ton truck. SoCal, thank you for that catch right there. So many variables when it comes to suspension off-road. Your best bet, actually, aftermarket suspension. Jose, nice, like the Tacoma. Again, SoCal, if you go with aftermarket suspension, you need high consider how much off-road you will do. Off-road and on-road handling are very different. Yes, let's go ahead and get into that topic since it's kind of going that way. Off-road suspensions are awesome, don't get me wrong. You get a lot of ground clearance, you can do a whole lot of stuff. Oftentimes you can get skid plates on your vehicle. This one here is the pre-runner, so it comes with preloaded skid plates on it. It's got factory skid plates on the fuel tank, and up underneath the front frame, it's got 2 additional skid plates. Mine are powder coated because this one never goes off-road, and this is just a cruiser for me. Very low mile cruiser for me, so that's what I use that one for. And when it comes to off-roading, the SoCal is so right. Your off-road and on-road suspensions are completely different, and you're not, what you want to do on-road is different than what you're going to do off-road. And sometimes when you get to the extremes on both ends, it doesn't work. So if you want it for driving and comfortable and being able to go long distances, you need a softer ride. When you want to go off-road, you need more ground clearance and you need more travel, which oftentimes means that it's going to be a little stiffer. They don't work well as one unit. So oftentimes that's why you see these manufacturers doing kind of a blend of both. So it's an on-road, off-road setup, but it's a little bit more off-road capable than what it is on-road comfortable. So I hope that answers your question. In my opinion, I think the fastest brands are the German ones. Okay. There's an issue with German engineering. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm sure I'm going to get some people that are going to hate me for it, but whatever. German engineering is really good. They do a great job. Here's the thing. Their maintenance intervals are absolutely a must. You cannot miss a single maintenance interval on anything German engineered. If you do, it's going to blow up on you. It's going to go bad. You're going to be replacing a lot of parts really quickly. So as far as that goes, when it comes to reliability, I hate to say this, but Toyota does build stuff that is designed that if you miss a maintenance interval, it's not horrible. They engineer their stuff to be beat on and trashed and ran hard. So you have a little bit more grace in there if you don't hit your oil changes at exactly the oil change interval. Toyota, or when it comes to German engineering like Volkswagen, that's not the case. Volkswagen is very, very, very maintenance heavy. You have to hit it at the right time. And if you don't do your maintenance like you're supposed to, they go bad. There's a lot of Volkswagens that come cruising through. A friend of mine is also a mechanic that works out of his own garage. He has replaced a lot of Volkswagen engines. Crazy amount of Volkswagen engines. It's insane how many he's done. And it's it's from all different models of Volkswagens. So it's not just one. I'm asking you about safety, bro. Okay. Yeah, if you're going to ask about safety, yeah, I would say German engineering safety is pretty good. You really can't beat it. They were kind of they pushed the way in a lot of different safety stuff, especially in seatbelt technology, airbags. They did a lot in that area, and it really kind of helped standardize the industry. So yeah, I'll give it to you on that. They did a really good job on the safety aspect. A lot of their vehicles are very, very safe. They have very high safety ratings. Volkswagen, a lot of the Volkswagen cars are up there in the safety ratings when you look at the rankings. It's crazy how they were able to maintain safety. Now, if they can blend the reliability in with that safety, they'd have a perfect car. But yeah, their maintenance program is so strict that just that alone makes you kind of lean away from those kind of cars. Just one of those bad things there. Thank you for clarifying that. I do appreciate that. SoCal. For example, my F-150 has king coil over shocks on all four corners. It handles desert off-road like a dream. However, on the freeway or normal city driving, it handles like a pile of trash. Yes, 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 yes. King Grant shocks are great, don't get me wrong, but they're great off-road. Not so good if you're going to go and drive 60 miles to work and back on the highway. Now, if you're going to take off-road trail the entire way, it might feel pretty good then. But yeah, off-road suspensions, guys, going full off-road is a commitment, and that means that you're probably not going to drive it on-road very often. Mercedes S-Class is the best ever. The Mercedes S-Class is a good and solid car, but extremely expensive, not only to fix and repair, but also the price tag. So if you've got the extra money to spend on it, yeah, if you can keep up with the maintenance, yeah. Again, that gets into a lot of that stuff. The maintenance is always the key. What can you afford to keep reliable on the road? And a lot of times it comes down to where you live and what vehicles are the most abundant, meaning what are more available. If the vehicles are more available in your country, parts might not be that bad. Labor might not be that bad because you got more of those vehicles. Here in the US, a Mercedes is actually more of a luxury car. So it is a lot more expensive to fix here in the US. And Jose, I want a four-wheel truck. So what is a good 90s or 2000s truck to get? So-called how much off-road or how much four-wheeling and what terrain type will you be doing, Jose? Yes, answer his question because that will depend on what advice we would give you as far as what truck you would want to get in that early 2000s. The thing is that I'll tell you is make sure that it has a solid frame. Do not buy one from the Rust Belt. Make sure it's solid because you can't build an off-road truck or do anything crazy with suspension if it's got a horrible frame. The frame has to be solid. Like for the beach. Honestly, the beach is not much off-roading. It's more driving over sand. So on those, you're going to want kind of a wider track. And you don't need a crazy amount of articulation on a beach setup, as far as I know. Now, if you're trying to crawl rocks that are on beaches, that's another story. Then you're closer to a rock crawler than you are anything else. So I guess help clarify what you're going to do on the beach. If you're just driving through sand or if you're going to be rock crawling on a beach. Because rock crawling is a whole different suspension setup and a whole different tuning. Honestly, a lot of the trucks you would get aren't really good for rock crawling unless you're really modifying them heavily. Wide stance, wider tires for sand. Yep, exactly, SoCal. Wide tires. You want to keep them wide. You want to disperse that weight wide on sand. If you try to put pencil tires in sand, it's going to go straight down. It's going to sink like a rock. And it'll spin. As soon as it spins, you're done. It'll just spin, throw sand, and drop. And you're definitely going to want four-wheel drive. I would say your best bang for your buck is probably going to be a Toyota. And that depends on how much you're going to haul. Like how much do you need the hauling capability? How much do you need box space? Or do you need more interior space than box space? My 4Runner got stuck one time and it was embarrassing. Always lower tire pressures when in sand also. Yeah. So your 4Runner, were you running stock rims and tires on that 4Runner? That's what I need to know. If you're running stock rims and tires, the rims are not wide enough to actually disperse the weight needed. No. Okay, so you were not running wider tire or stock rims and tires. You were running aftermarkets. Do you have the 4Runner because you're hauling people around? Is that what you're doing? BKD, good to see you with the wrench. I'm glad you chatted back in. I wanted to make sure that I was able to mod you up. I agree if you find good pre-owned Toyota trucks. Yes, it's got to be good. The frames are the biggest issue on Toyota trucks. Jose, no. Okay. If you're not hauling a whole lot of people around, the Tacoma is actually more capable in the sand than the 4Runner. Allow me to explain why. 4Runners have very short wheel bases like this, so it's all jammed together underneath. The Tacomas have a little longer wheelbase. You can go with either the quad cab or extended cab. You can extend that back and make sure that you can disperse the weight, because it's always about dispersing weight. In sand, it's like driving through basically soupy mud that will suck you down. So you want to extend that out and get that wheelbase out. Get your rims pushed out. Go with a wider rim. Maybe consider an 8-inch or a 10-inch wide rim so you can disperse that weight out. Okay, there we go. Hopefully it didn't drop chat on you guys. Let me know if it dropped chat. I just had a reconnection. Sometimes that happens if I film for a while. I gotta see where I'm at. Okay. Let me know if I still got you guys here in chat. It had to reconnect. SoCal, we're good. Okay, thank you. SoCal, 4Runner should be capable of most beaches. However, 4 low and wide tires with low air pressure should be okay unless you drive stupid. Which is more powerful, turbocharge or supercharge? Let's go ahead and get into the whole turbocharge, supercharge thing, guys. But yeah, SoCal, you're right. If he lowered the oil, the air pressure in the tires, kept wide tires, wide stance, and a 4 low, and did not spin the tires going through the sand, he would probably not get stuck. Again, if you're trying to do some fun sand off-roading, you need to use a sand off-road tire so that when you do spin and throw sand, you're kicking the sand out and it's pushing you forward. Oftentimes you'll see like scoop tires for sand. They're not always the most affordable, and they're definitely not designed to be on the road at all, ever. But you can usually get some good sand tires that'll work really good for some of that off-roading. If you're just tired of the 4Runner at this point and you want to upgrade, I think your Tacomas would be a good bet. You can get that weight pushed out, especially if you get a TRD. TRDs are pretty capable right out of the box. The only thing you might have to do is change out your rims and tires and drop your air pressure. Just make sure you have a way to air the tires back up when you leave the sand. If you're going to leave and go drive home with it, get that air pressure back up in those tires so you don't destroy the tires driving it home. And usually I would drop it anywhere from, if you're running 40 pounds of air pressure in your tires on the highway, you could probably drop it down around that 25 range, 28. I don't know if I would go below 20 though. Not unless you got bead lockers, because you don't want to blow the beads off. And then let's go ahead and get into the turbocharger versus supercharger. Guys, superchargers have their place, and that place is the racetrack, because they do damage a lot of stuff. They're designed to push a whole bunch of air into the engine, dump a whole bunch of fuel into the engine, and push that engine to its pretty much maximum capability. That is a crazy way to build power, and it's not always the most sustainable. Turbochargers are good long term, but they have their issues too. Usually at about 100,000, you're going to be putting in a new turbocharger. That's why a lot of these newer cars that are running these 4-cylinder turbos, I'm not a fan of at all, because they're going to wind up putting a turbo in them. It's just the nature of the beast. Those turbochargers wear out. They need to be replaced. There's nothing you can do about it. They are a heavy maintenance item, and oftentimes they're not the cheapest to replace. There's a little bit you can do with them to get performance and stuff like that out of it, but honestly, naturally aspirated is the best to go as far as reliability. And you can still build some crazy power with naturally aspirated. And how you do that is to get your compression ratio up. So if you're going to build an engine, build a high compression engine running a decent cam, meaning something that is a little bit better than stock. Now, if you're going to do that, make sure you have a way of retuning the computer. If you can't retune the computer, then push that compression ratio up as high as you can, but keep everything stock. That's the best thing you can do to gain performance and power without having to do a full retune on a computer. All-terrain tires, just not for four-wheel drive. Okay, so yeah, if you've got the all-terrains but you don't have four-wheel drive, that's anytime you're doing anything. Let me make sure. Yeah, if you're doing anything off-roading and it's a two-wheel drive, you're going to struggle, because as soon as you spin those rear tires, you're not going to have enough bite to pull yourself back out. And that is the deeper issue here, is you got to have the four-wheel drive bite. So definitely. JT2521, do you still have your Ranger? No, actually, that Ranger was a customer of mine, a friend who brought me that truck to use in a video that I did a bunch of videos on it, quite a few. He bought the thing just super cheap. He was trying to get a cheap, reliable manual truck, and he brought it to me, and I did a few videos on it. So yeah, that was quite a weekend of working on that thing, top to bottom. But that one was never my truck. It was one that appeared on the channel, and it was one that we did some stuff on. As far as vehicles I got on the channel, I'll just do a quick rundown. I know a lot of guys have heard it. I've got the 04 Toyota Tacoma Silver Swine. I've got the 2012 Malibu LT. We've got a 2020 Kia Soul EX, and I have a 01 GMC Jimmy SLT. So, in my experience, the Nissan Patrol is the most powerful car when it comes to climbing sand terrain. That is very possible as far as what you're looking at. The only thing is ask yourself, how much more mods are you going to have to do to it to get it where you want it? And always, 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 anytime you're playing around in sand, you're going to want that four-wheel drive so you don't get stuck. That's super important. SoCal, I would not recommend turbo or supercharger, just like I said before. Your daily driver, unless you are good with maintenance and very regular schedule. Yes, again, they have their place. A lot of times it's on the track, or it's in situations where you need a ton of power. Diesel applications, you want the turbo because you need it for pulling. But it's expensive when they need to be fixed. So not always the best option, guys. Okay. I thought it was yours. No, that's okay, JT. That's perfectly fine. I do a lot of work for customers. Sometimes I'll feature their vehicles, sometimes I won't. Some vehicles I can, some vehicles I can't. I try to let my customers dictate if I'm going to let them show. Otherwise, I'll just do work on my own stuff and I'll show that on camera instead. So it's a mix of both. Sometimes I do get some customer stuff in. A lot of times it is my vehicles. SoCal, number one rule is no matter what vehicle you plan to off-road, never leave home without recovery gear. Yes, always pack an emergency gear with a couple of different tow straps. Honestly, I would have a chain or two if you need it. Always have a way to air up tires or rebead tires. Make sure you have a way of replacing rims and tires. Anytime you're going to get crazy off-road, make sure you carry enough gear to fix whatever you could break. I know some guys used to carry U-joints and drive shafts around just in case. Because if they hit their drive shaft and spun the drive shaft, they'd break it. So I knew guys that would carry around extra drive shafts and U-joints. So that's the fun and joys of off-roading that a lot of people don't talk about, is you get a lot of the crazy off-road stuff that's just, it's insane. You know, there's so much extra gear you got to carry just to be able to have a good time. Are you okay with hybrid cars? To a point. If we're talking daily drivers, they have their purpose. The only thing I don't like is that they all feel anemic. They all feel like they're dead half the time. I don't like the maintenance that is required on a hybrid, especially when that battery starts going bad. Those hybrid batteries are extremely expensive, oftentimes can't be fixed, and oftentimes are a hazard to dispose of. So the hybrids are not necessarily the best option, but they're kind of the way things are going to go. I've already talked about it, how EVs are dying off, but higher fuel mileage hybrids are starting to become the norm, and that's what we're going to see. Unfortunately, those are going to become the daily drivers. Those are not going to be the performance vehicles. Those are still going to be probably gas-powered engines as long as they can. But yeah, a lot of your hybrids are going to be daily driver stuff. And they're okay. Some of them are decent to work on. Some of the first gen hybrid stuff wasn't too bad. It was just a cell that you could take the cells apart and replace cells that were bad. Other ones now that are running the newer battery packs, I'm not a fan of, because those battery packs are expensive. They're hard to replace. If you don't have a lift, you can't do it. So yeah, on that, that's how I feel about that. So Cal, always carry at least 3 times the amount of water you think you're going to need for off-road. Yes. Always carry the water. And the reason why is if you ever blow a radiator hose, you're going to need to put the hose back on and refill the radiator. So it's always wise to carry at least a few gallons of water. And here's the thing. People that carry water for off-roading, I do have to give you guys some. The smart people will already know what I'm talking about. The ones that don't, I'm going to inform you. Do not put tap water into your radiator on any vehicle. The reason why is tap water contains minerals. Minerals destroy head gaskets. You're going to wind up having to fix and replace a lot of stuff if you don't run distilled water inside of your engine. So if you're carrying water to replace in your engine setup because it overheated, carry distilled water. Do not carry spring water or tap water. That is bad stuff. Do not do that. Jose, buddy, you good motivation. God bless. God bless you too. So yes, that's if you're going to do off-roading, like SoCal said, make sure you carry enough water, but know what kind of water you're carrying. You do want to carry enough drinking water. If you're going far enough off trail, make sure you carry enough for a few days at least, because you're going to need to be able to drink a few gallons of water until you can get back to wherever you got to go. The other thing is make sure you carry distilled water so you can put that in your engine, not tap water. Too many people want to fill up jugs with tap water, which contains a whole bunch of minerals, and then, yeah. BKD, absolutely 100% use distilled water a bunch, yes. Any off-roading, any racing, guys, tap water is a no-no. It damages engines, causes a whole bunch of problems. It's distilled water. In fact, actually, industry secret, when you're buying your antifreeze premixed, what you're paying the extra money for is distilled water. If you bought the concentrate bottle, which is usually a little cheaper, the concentrate bottle will break down into 2 bottles of premix by buying 1 gallon of distilled water. SoCal, you can survive without food, but no drinking water, simply a mistake and can turn deadly. Yes, I agree. Always, always, always know where you're going, how far you're going, carry enough drinking water to be able to make it back. Think about if you had to walk back from wherever you were off-roading to be able to get back to civilization, and at least carry another 2 days extra of water just to make sure. Which is the best dual clutch or manual transmission? If you're off-roading, because that's the questions you've been asking, I would say manual is going to be your best bet because you can control it and you can keep the heat out of the clutches. On a dual clutch setup, if you're trying to run any kind of automatic transmission doing off-roading, you're going to generate a ton of heat. There's very few successful off-road setups that don't run old school transmissions. And what we're meaning by old school, we're talking turbo 300s and turbo 400s. These are old school 3-manual or 3-speed automatic transmissions. These things can be built to be almost bulletproof, and they do pretty decent when they start getting hot. A lot of your 4 speeds, 5 speeds, and even up to the modern day 10 speeds, they don't handle heat at all. A lot of the 1-ton trucks that I've had a chance to deal with have had issues with overheat just pulling a trailer. So as far as that goes, I would definitely lean towards the manual option if you're doing any off-roading. It'll allow you to control it a lot better and keep the heat out of the transmission. You're already going to be pushing the motor in higher RPM situations sometimes, so you want to keep heat to a minimum as much as possible. Glad I figured out how to wrench you guys up too, because that was bugging me having to wait to wrench you guys when I had to wait for the video to fully render, because sometimes it'll take 2 days for YouTube to fully render a video. So that's why, SoCal, that's why I was late getting you that wrench. But I figured out how to do it on here. I just have to click on your message and I can wrench you from there. So glad that worked. Now I got you guys wrenched. SoCal, if you do have a manual transmission off-road, keep your foot off the clutch unless you are actually shifting. Never use the clutch as a quick power boost. Correct. Don't try to power boost with a clutch. You'll fry the clutch. Because what's happening is when you're trying to power boost, you're trying to bump it and get it to power in and out. Don't do that. You'll heat up the clutch and you'll burn it out. Jose, is it better to drive clutch as a daily driver or an automatic? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this crazy topic right now. This is one that I have to tiptoe around because it all depends on the driver's skill and the gearing inside each particular transmission. Modern day 8 and 10 speed transmissions will get better fuel mileage. As far as a daily driver, oftentimes fuel mileage is what you're going for. So if fuel mileage is what you're going for, then you'll want to go with the automatic. Reliability wise though, long term, the manual is going to be more durable, meaning it'll do more and be more capable long term. You won't have to do as much maintenance to it. There won't need to be as much that you'll have to take care of on the manual transmission. Automatic transmissions, you have to do your transmission flushes when you're supposed to. Otherwise, you can break down the clutch material and you can also damage the torque converters. This is another weak point, is the torque converters on automatic transmissions. That being said, when those break, it costs thousands to fix. So you're looking at roughly the same cost to fix a manual transmission or an automatic transmission. The newer automatic transmissions are a lot more expensive though. The valve bodies are crazy how they're built, and the cost skyrockets the more gears you have. And that's the honest truth. If you're going for fuel mileage though, your automatics will give you the best fuel mileage. Just know that you need to do your maintenance, do the transmission fluid changes when you're supposed to, and keep up on that maintenance interval, and it'll last for quite a long time. If you want something more bulletproof that you're going to use the truck on the weekends to do other stuff, lean towards the manual. So Cal, that's a matter of preference, traffic, and skill with a clutch. Yep, I agree 100%. If you're good with a clutch and you're not going to drag your foot on that clutch and slowly release it all the time, you don't want to pop the clutch, but you don't want to drag your foot slowly off the clutch either. The longer you drag it, the more that disc spins on the flywheel and heats up. The more that heats up, the more it burns away that clutch material. You want to get it to seat onto the clutch at a decent pace without causing it to drag. Guys that pop clutches, I've seen them destroy the clutch. So you don't want to do that either. You don't want to just do a clutch dump. That tears clutches up in a hurry. But yes, as far as, again, people sometimes hate manuals in traffic because it's stop and go, stop and go. They're having to clutch a lot. Their leg gets sore. It gets to be one of those things where you're constantly fighting it. It's a hassle. So sometimes automatic for heavy traffic is better. But again, make sure you do your transmission flushes. So Cal, people have a good tendency to ride the clutch in heavy traffic, which ends up killing it. Yep, that's exactly it. People will drag their foot on the clutch, meaning that they'll feather it way too much. And as they feather it, that disc is spinning and burning and heating up against the flywheel. And that destroys clutches. Traffic is the worst thing on a clutch. It really is. Stop and go is horrible on a clutch. Even a dual force friction clutch that's designed to do track and street, you don't want to drag that clutch. You want to get off of it safely as quickly as you can, and you don't want to be engaging and disengaging it a lot. Oftentimes I know guys that have learned how to shift without even engaging the clutch. They float the gears. The only thing is, you don't know what you're doing when you float gears. You'll destroy the synchronizers in the transmission. So there's always a trade-off. If you're good with shifting and you can do it without wrecking the synchros, you can float the gears. Float them between the RPM, throttle down to shift up, throttle up to shift down. If you get good with that, you can do that without using the clutch. Thus, you save the wear and tear on the clutch. But gotta be careful there. You can destroy a lot of stuff if you just force it into gear. You can destroy the fork, you can destroy the synchros, you can mash a gear and destroy a gear. Jose, yeah, clutch cars are good for a second car that you don't use much. Yeah, Jose, I'd agree with you. I really would. Great for sports cars. Great for the fun cruiser that I actually would like to do a conversion on this and swap this out and do a four-wheel drive conversion. I just don't want to spend the time to find a 4Runner and gut all the stuff out of it, because that's what I would need. I would need a 4Runner TRD, roughly the 04 range, pull the transmission, put in the transfer case with the transmission out of the 4Runner along with the front sections, because my spindles are the same. My wheel bearings are the same. The only thing I would need is the front differential, the front shafts, the front drive shaft, the transfer case, and the transmission. Most of the holes are already in the truck, so it's not a matter of me even cutting new holes for it. SoCal, you have to know exactly or exact RPM to speed shift without clutch. Yes, you have to know your vehicle. You do. You have to know where to float the gear in and out. Some people call it speed shifting. Other people call it floating. If you drive truck, semi truck, you float gears. You're not speed shifting. You're floating. You're basically using the RPMs to float between the gears because you're not actually clutching the truck. You clutch it on takeoff. That's the only time you clutch a semi, and then you press the clutch all the way in if you're gonna put it into gear, but you only push it down a little bit if you want to take it out and let it coast to a stop. But yeah, truck drivers know the term floating gears. We float to shift gears so that we don't have to use the clutch. But a semi transmission and a car transmission are completely different. You have synchros, you have a tighter gear pattern, the gear cut is different. That all plays into how you shift that transmission. Manual transmission requires the driver to manually shift gears, commonly found in sports cars and commercial vehicles. Correct. SoCal, I come from an off-road racing background, so my lingo may be a bit different. Yes. Yeah, as long as you're coming from that off-road background, you guys are going to have different terms that you'll use, but we are talking the same thing. It literally is exactly the same thing. So that being said, I mean, the stuff I'll tell you and the stuff you're going to tell the chat, it's the same thing. It's just they're going to have two different terminologies there, which is cool because they'll get both sides then. Thanks, bro. See you on next stream. Yes, thank you for tuning in. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you next stream next Sunday at 1 p.m. I've got a lot coming up, guys. We're going to go ahead and cover some of the stuff that we've got going. So this week here, I did the oil change on this car. I basically got everything done on it. I wasn't going to show that here live because it's an oil change. I believe I've already done an oil change on this car on this channel, so I wasn't going to do it twice. I've also done brakes on this car, and I'm not going to do that twice. But I am going to tear this one down, swap out the pads, and then we're going to talk about what I actually found and why we had the issue. So that video will be coming up probably within the next couple weeks. Next week, I am looking at getting a customer car in. That customer car is a Yukon. That Yukon is throwing a code for the brakes, and it's a random code based on the brake booster. The brake booster is throwing a code because there's a sensor for the vacuum pressure that goes into the brake booster. That sensor is now failing. I've already ordered the part. It should be here Friday. As long as that's here Friday, Sunday, I plan on doing that vehicle. Now that one's going to get an oil change. We're going to probably cover that oil change here because there's some stuff going on that we did talk about in this video that does pertain to what happened there as far as maintenance. I want to show you guys what that was, describe the situation. And currently that customer is choosing to not fix it and keep putting oil in until it gets really bad. So far, we've been doing pretty good with it and been able to keep up with it. But if the oil consumption gets any worse, we are going to have to pull the transmission and put that rear main seal in that should have been done from the manufacturer. Guys, as always, thank you for all your support. This has been a long stream, a good stream, and I've enjoyed it. Guys, as always, tune in every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Time, and I'll see you guys on the next one.